The Camus speech at the Nobel banquet at the City Hall in Stockholm, December 10, 1957. In receiving the distinction with which your free academy has so generously honored me, my gratitude my gratitude has been profound, particularly when I consider the extent to which this recompense has surpassed my personal merits. Every man, and for stronger reasons, every artist wants to be recognized. So do I. But I have not been able to learn of your decision without comparing these repercussions to what I really am. I'm a man almost young, rich only in his thoughts and with his work still in progress, accustomed to living in the solitude of work or in the retreats of friendship. How could he not feel a kind of panic at hearing the decree that transports he all of a sudden, allowed and reduced to himself, to the center of a glaring light, and with that feelings could he accept this this honor at a time when other writers in Europe, among them the very greatest, the condemned to silence, the very greatest are condemned to silence, and even at a time when the country of his birth is going through unending misery. I felt that shock and inner turmoil. In order to regain peace, I have had. In order to regain peace, I have had. In short, to come to terms with a too generous fortune, and since I cannot live up to it by merely resting on my achievement, I have found nothing to support me but what has supported me through all my life, even in the most contrary circumstances. The idea that I have of my art and of the lore of the writer, let me only tell you, in a splendid of gratitude and friendship, as simply as I can, what this idea is. For myself, I cannot live without my art, but I have never placed it above everything. If, on the other hand, I need it, it is because it cannot be separated from my fellow men, and it allows me to live, such as I am, on one level with them. It is a means of stirring. It is a means of stirring the greatest number of people by offering them a privileged picture of common joys and sufferings. It obliges it obliges the artist not to keep himself apart. It it subjects it subjects he to the most humble and the most universal truth. And and often he who has chosen the fate of the artist because he felt himself to be different soon realizes that he can maintain neither his art nor his difference unless he admits that he is like the others. The art the artist the artist forgets the artist forgets himself to the others, midway midway between the beauty he cannot do without and the community he cannot tear himself away from. That is why true artists scorn nothing. They are obliged to understand rather than to judge. And if they and if they do and if they have to take sides in this world in this world, they can perhaps side owning with the society in which according to Nietzsche's great words, not the judge but the creator will rule, whether he be a worker or an intellectual. But the same token, but the same token, the writer's law is not free from difficult duties. By definition, he cannot put himself today in the service of those who make history. He is at the service of those who suffer it. Otherwise, he will be alone and deprived of his art. Not all the enemies of tyranny. Not all the enemies of tyranny with their millions of men will free him from his isolation, even and particularly if he falls into step with them. But the silence of an unknown prison, abandoned to humiliations at the other end of the world is enough to draw the writer out of his exile. At least whenever in the midst of the privileges of freedom, he manages not to forget that silence and to transmit it in order to make it resound by means of his art. None of us is great enough for such a task, but in all circumstance of life, in obscurity or temporary fame, cast in the irons of tyranny of tyranny, or for a time free to express himself. The writer can win the heart of a living community that justify will justify he on the on the one condition that that he will accept to the limit of his abilities the the two tasks that constitute the greatness of his craft, the service of truth and the service of liberty. liberty. But his task is to unite the greatest possible number of people. His art must not compromise with lies and servitude, which wherever they rule, breed solitude. Whatever our personal weakness may be, the nobility of our craft will always be rooted into commitments. Commitments difficult to maintain. The refusal to lie about what one knows and the resistance to oppression. For more than 20 years of an insane history, hopelessly lost, like old men of my generation in the commercials of time. I have been supported by one thing. By the hidden feeling that to write today was an honor. Was an honor.
Honor.
Was an honor because this activity was a commitment. Was a commitment and a commitment not only to write. Specifically in view of my powers and my state of being, it was a commitment to bear. Together with all those who were living through the same history, the misery and the hope we shared. Those men who were born at the beginning of the First World War, who were 20 when Hitler came to power, and the first revolutionary trials were beginning, who were then confronted as a completion of the education with the Spanish Civil War, the Second World War, the world of concentration, camps, a Europe of torture, and prisons. This man must today rear the sons and create the works in a world threatened in a world threatened by nuclear destruction. Nobody, I think, can ask them to be optimized, optimized, optimized. And I even think that we should understand without ceasing to Friday. The error the error of those who in an excess of despair have assented have assented have asserted the right to dishonor and have rushed into the nihilism of the era. era. But the fact remains that most of us in my country and in Europe have refused this nihilism and have engaged upon a quest for legitimacy, legitimacy, for legitimacy. They have had to forge for themselves in art of living in times of class catastrophe 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 in times of catastrophe in order to be born a second time and to fight only against the instinct of death at work in our history. Each generation doubtless feels called upon to reform the world. My knows that it will not reform it, but this task is perhaps even greater. It consists in preventing the world from destroying itself. R R R to R R to a corrupt history. R to corrupt to a corrupt history in which are mingled in which are mingled violent revolutions, technology gone mad, dead gods and worn out ideologies, where mediocre powers can destroy all yet no all can destroy all yet no longer know how to convince. Well intelligence has debased itself to become the servant of hatred and oppression. This generation starting from this Starting from this, all neg- negations has had to re-establish both within both 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 within and without. A little of a little of that which that a little of that which constitute constitutes the dignity which constitutes the dignity of life and death. In a world threatened threatened by this disintegration by disintegration in which our grand inquisitor 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 inquisitors inquisitor inquisitor inquisitors in which our grand inquisitors to run the risk of establishing forever the kingdom the kingdom of death. It knows that it should, in an insane race against the clock, restore among the nations among the nations a peace that is not servitude. Servitude. Reconcile. 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 Reconcile a new labor and culture, and remake with all people, and remake with all men the arc of the of covalent It is not certain. It is not certain that this generation will ever be able to accomplish this immense task. But already it is reaching everywhere in the world to the double challenge of truth and liberty, and if necessary, knows how to die for it without hate. Wherever it is found, it deserves to be saluted. It deserves to be saluted and encouraged, particularly where it is sacrificing where it is sacrificing itself. In any event, certain of your complete approve. It is to this generation that I should like to pass on the honor that you have just given me. To pass on the honor that you have just given me. At the same time, after having outlined the nobility of the writer's craft, I should have put him in his proper place. He has no other claims, but thus which he shares with his comrades, with his comrades in arms, vulnerable but obstinate, vulnerable but obstinate, unjust but impassioned for justice, doing his work without shame or pride in will of everybody, of of everybody, not ceasing to be divided, divided, between between sorrow and beauty. The devoted, finally, finally to join, to join from, his double existence, the creations that he obstinate, 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 that he obstinately, obstinately, that he obstinately tries to erect, in the destructive, movement of history. In the destructive movement of history. Who after all, this can expect from he complete solitude, he complete solutions and high morals. Truth is mysterious. Truth is mysterious, elusive, always to be conquered. Always to be conquered. Liberty is dangerous, as hard to live with as it is Latin. Liberty is dangerous, as hard to live with, as it is Latin. We must march toward just two goals. Painfully, but resolutely. Painfully but resolutely, certain in advance of our feelings on us, so long allowed. What writer could from now on in good conscience that set himself up as a preacher of virtue? For myself, I must state once more that I am not of this kind. I have never been able to renounce the night. I have never been able to renounce the light, the pleasure of being, and the freedom in which I grew up, But although this nostalgia, but although this nostalgia, explains many of my errors and my faults, it has doubtless helped me toward a better toward a better understanding of my craft. It is helping me still to support. It is helping me still to support unquestionably or or just silent or just silent man who sus, to su, who sustain their life made for made for them in the world only through memory of the return of belief and free happiness. Thus reduced to what I really am, to my limits and debates as well as to my difficult creed. I feel freer in concluding to comment to comment up the extent and the generosity of the honor you have just best bestowed. The honor you have just bestowed up on me. Freer also to tell you that I could receive it as an home as an homage rendered rendered
rendered
to an homage and homage rendered rendered to all those who sharing in the same flight sharing sharing in the same flight have not received my have not received any privilege, but have on the contrary, but have on the contrary, knowing mystery and perception and perception. It remains for me to thank you. It remains for me to thank you the bottom from the bottom from the bottom of my heart and to make before you publicly as a personal sign of my gratitude. The same and ancient 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 the same and ancient the same and ancient the same and ancient promise of faithfulness promise and faithfulness which which every true art which every true artist repeats to himself in silence every day.